Are you a new or inexperienced gardener and you've been wanting to take on tomatoes? Well, I'm an inexperienced gardener and I've grown tomatoes successfully now for 2 seasons. In this video, I just want to show you guys what I've done, some of the challenges I've faced, some of the things that I've learned over these last few seasons to just try and help you guys grow tomatoes successfully. Dude. Yeah! Cool, man. Yeah, so even the birds are excited. I hope you guys are excited. Let's just get into the video. So last season when I grew tomatoes, I grew them in this bed here with a lapa. I had 2 beds, one on either side. For basic bed prep, all I did is I amended the soil a little bit with compost. Being an inexperienced, very new gardener, I didn't want to struggle with like seed germination and introduce additional points of failure. So we just opted, you know what, let's take it the easy route. Go to a nursery, get some seedlings, put them in the ground, and at least learn how the plants grow. We got 6 seedlings. We planted, I think it was 4 on this side and 2 on the other side. That worked out actually pretty well, especially as a new gardener. You already have the plants, it's already healthy. All you need to do is maintain it and keep it at that point, and then you're pretty much good to go. With a bit of compost that we put in, there was enough nutrients in the soil to actually take it all the way through to its end of life. They were indeterminate cherry varieties. We also got 2 determinate, which I'll talk about now. But now these indeterminates, these sort of 1 meter stakes, we used them pretty much the same last year. Cable ties, but the problem is because it's a hard plastic, what tends to happen is it burns the stems. And introduces additional areas for disease and pests and stuff, so I don't recommend that. This year I'm using this cotton twine and it's working out pretty well. The only thing that I would suggest is, because you'll see, I don't want to disturb this little dude, they're not, you can't make it too tight, right? Otherwise you're going to suffocate the plant. So what I've done with the cotton, I've tied it around the pole first, around the stake, and then I tied it around this. So you have it fixed onto the stake, but then it's just a loose fitting on the actual plant, like that. So just in terms of sun requirements, last year, even this year with this bed here, this bed gets hot afternoon sun for about 5, 6, maybe 7 hours if you include the very latest part of dusk. But on the other side of the lapa, that gets the sort of coolish morning sun up to about 12 o'clock. That's around about 5 hours, because it has to get shaded out by an adjacent building. So what I found is, in terms of plant vigor, despite the sun hours being the same, the only difference being the heat of the sun, the intensity of it, this side, which gets the hottest afternoon sun, produced more fruit, which is just kind of interesting. So the plants themselves didn't get affected, but the production did. Just further lending to what everyone says, that tomatoes are hot weather crop and everything. So if you are really constrained with space and you don't really have the optimum conditions, just at least try and get it into hot sun. It seems to do very well with it. I spaced them from stake to stake, i.e. stem to stem. We placed them between 400 and 500 mils apart last year. This year, because all of these plants in this bed are volunteers, I didn't really have control of that, but I thinned them to round about the same. These stakes themselves, I haven't really measured them, but it's around about 500 mils apart at the moment. I found it worked very well last year, especially if it does get a little bit out of hand with regards to the size of the plant. As a beginner, if there is a risk, or even if you're busy, right, if there is a risk of the plants getting out of control because, really life, then yeah, I would suggest strongly space them further apart. I mean, it's not like you'll lose that space anyways, you can just interplant other stuff. So what we did, right, last year, not only did we space them at 400 apart, but we also interplanted with companion plants. So last year, even this year, you'll see I've got this sweet Elizum here. This is actually overwintered from last year. I currently also have these marigolds and basil. Last year I had more of them, and they were basically interplanted between each of the plants on both sides. So last year I didn't struggle with disease. I didn't really struggle with blight or any fungal issues. So last year was actually a pretty successful growing season for me as a new gardener. Despite not having much experience, not a lot of my family grows, so it was quite encouraging to have a decent harvest from the tomatoes. They're actually relatively hardy. Just a quick thing with volunteers, it's really cool to see there's like volunteer plants popping up every now and then. Dude, I've got a volunteer on the backside of the lapa. I don't know how it got there. I have a volunteer tomato plant there by my gate in the front yard. Again, I don't know how it got there. It's not like I buried scraps there. So the only way that could have happened is a bird ate some of the seeds, digested it out, fermented a bit, and then nature calls, seed drops with a lot of nutrition and fertilizer, and it took. So I'm going to see what happens with those. The ones by the lapa, I don't think it's going to set fruit because it's in a very shady spot. But in the front yard, that dude's going to get blasted with hot sun, a lot of sun. So I'm very keen to see how that one performs. I'm not going to water it. I probably will have to stake it just to make sure that the plant actually survives. But apart from that, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to see what happens with that guy. Yeah. So this season's been a stark contrast to last season. Where last season we got only seedlings from the nursery, put them in with compost in not necessarily the right conditions, but at least it had hot afternoon sun, and that produced pretty well. So last season we got in total, I think it was about 3 kgs, 4 kgs maybe, amongst 8 plants, because there was 6 indeterminates and then 2 determinates. Because the 2 determinates, they set fruit once and then they pretty much ticketed out. Yeah, they weren't, as a new gardener, they were also in pots, so they dried out quite a bit. I struggled to keep moisture in that. I found the in-ground gardening was definitely a little bit easier. So if you do start as a newbie, maybe try getting a bigger pot. Don't just get like a 5-gallon pot or what is it? I think it's like a 10 liter bucket. Maybe opt for like a 25 liter paint bucket. That might help significantly with the moisture retention. So this year, what I decided to do is I wanted to sort of hide this concrete wall. I wanted to create a vertical tomato garden that just produced a lot of fruit vertically. That was the plan. I had 3 of these panels allocated to tomatoes, 3 different varieties. It was salad, sauces, and sandwiches, or sandwiches was actually in the middle. So it was cherry tomatoes, beefsteak, oxheart tomatoes, and then it was Roma tomatoes. That was the plan. I wanted to grow them vertically to maximize as much vertical production as possible. I didn't want to bisect the garden bed. I wanted to grow the wall and try and use that space that's a little bit of an awkward space, grow vertically, and then everything else could then grow in front. I just wanted to try and be a little bit more efficient with that. So at the start of the season, I created this bed. It wasn't existing before, it was just lawn. So to prepare for the tomatoes, all I did is I dug a trench, buried a whole bunch of scraps and a bit of potash from the bra. In terms of nutrition, it worked out very well throughout the whole growing season. I didn't notice any nutrient deficiencies, so definitely recommend if you don't have much compost. Now, I also spaced the tomatoes too close to the wall. I spaced them about 100 mils from the wall, from the post, the outside post, too close. I spaced them 200 mils from each other, so I had 6 tomatoes next to each other, basically in 1.3 meter space, which is very tight. What ends up happening is it's not so much of a nutrient and water fight at the bottom with all the root systems. It's more the top foliage fighting for air and sunlight. So that's definitely an issue. What I also did, I tried to do the Florida weave. I put in 1.5 meter stakes. Then as the seedlings or as the plants grew up, I then just took cotton twine, tied it around the post, did a single loop around the plants to try and prevent them from falling over. The problem is it doesn't stop them laterally from falling over within the weave itself. So then they ended up falling on top of each other and just creating a mess further. After that, I then tried with the twine. When I was busy weaving the loop, I wanted to try and then interweave between each of the tomato plants, come around the back to try and then have single spaces. That didn't really work because those points between each of the plants where the string intersects or crosses, it's not tied, it's not fixed. So it doesn't prevent the tomatoes from falling over, it just slips, it moves. So that was not a plan. It eventually got so bad, I had to reset the roamers. I had to prune them down, take away the trellis, and then try and put in some form of a hard trellis with sticks that I had lying around. That worked so much better, I tell you what. The mistake I did was lack of pruning and maintenance. So obviously with everything that happened, I wasn't able to prune it. So these guys, they really started fighting for sunlight and everything. Became a massive unruly mess on both sides. Last year, or should I say in the first season, I was able to catch because I didn't know when to prune or anything. I didn't really have a scheduled routine for pruning. So what ended up happening is when I see the suckers, I would take them off and all that if I didn't want them. And it works to relative success. The problem is I ended up leaving the suckers too long to go without pruning. So on a few occasions, it just got a little bit out of hand and I had to reset the plants and stuff. But at least with the amount of spacing that he had between the plants, it was easy. I could take the stakes down, I could set the tomatoes down, prune what I needed to, and just put them back up, and that was fine. Here on the other hand, with this season, it was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. I didn't have the space. The Florida weave created this massive untangled mess of twine and tomato plants, and everything was just crawling over each other, bro. Man, no, it was insufferable. So because they were so close together, they were so close to the wall, with the Florida weave with a twine, because it's not it's very flimsy. So just the spaghetti mess of tomato plant vines was just so unruly to deal with. So definitely you want to keep on top of your maintenance if you're going to have indeterminate varieties. So yeah, another issue that I actually had, I struggled getting some companion plants over here because those were overwintered. Now over here, the marigolds and the basil, they came late on the season. I eventually had to purchase them from the nursery. I tried germinating them from seed, man, I struggled. And then obviously I had the injury, and then that just put everything back as well. So next time, for sure, when I start the seedlings, or when I sort out the seedlings for the tomatoes, then I'm going to do the companion plants same time. Don't do it at a later stage. Life happens, just do it all at the same time. It'll make your life much easier. The cherry tomatoes, we started them from seed late August. We started them in a pot where we were also trying to grow a lemon tree out of, and it worked, right? The germination worked, everything came up, but what ended up happening is, because I had so many tomato plants within this small container with this lemon tree, it became very difficult to try and take them out without damaging the roots of this new lemon tree. So I definitely don't recommend that. Rather just put it separate. Once I had those tomato plants out of the lemon tree container, I put them in a separate container. Mistake. I should have put them directly in the ground. I actually waited so long to plant them from the second transplanting. They started putting on fruit. So once I actually eventually got them into the ground, they had already started setting fruits, and then they got a lot of transplant shock and they weren't happy. They did all survive at least, which was pretty decent. As for the oxhearts and the romas, those were seedlings that we purchased from the store, from the nursery, just because I didn't have the seeds at the time. On pests, so I didn't really have many issues with aphids. I did notice these little white and black insects crawling around, especially on the romas, and they spread out. I don't know what they are, and I don't know if they did any damage or not. But on the fruits themselves, ripe and unripened, I found a lot of these almost look like they've been stung. So I did a bit of a Google search. It looks like it's damage from fruit flies. So this past December and January, Joburg has had a lot of issues with fruit flies. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing because last season I didn't have any issues like that. But this year it's been actually pretty bad. So I just wanted to quickly add that in there. You'll see it's like it literally looks like it's been punctured. Yeah, like almost like it's been stung. With all of these tomato plants, they all basically set fruit around about the same time, but really I started harvesting them all at the same time. Within the last month, that's really when we started being able to harvest. Sort of at the end of December, early January, up to now, early Feb. They've produced almost 15 kilograms of tomatoes within a single month. I didn't have a pasta shop, bro. I don't know what to do with so many tomatoes. So it's a success that I've been able to grow so much, but the problem is it's all at once. So I had to process a lot of it, make sauce. I've given quite a bit of away to fam as well. But it's actually a bit of a planning issue more than anything else. It's really cool to have so much food. So next time I'm gonna have some determinate varieties, hopefully set fruit and harvest earlier on in the season for that first sort of harvest of tomatoes. Then the indeterminates will sort of be a mid to late season game. But then at the end of the season, I'll have another set of determinates, which will give me another setting of fruit. Just to try and space everything out a little bit better. Because, yeah, I mean, 15 kgs of tomatoes, bro, yeah, it's too much, dude. It's nice to be able to preserve it and all that, but we don't really have the space for preservation at this point in time. So it's also just something to consider. That 15 kilograms of tomatoes, that is from, so it was 6 cherry tomatoes, 4 of the oxhearts survived, so that's 10, and then 3 of the Roma survived. So that's 13. So out of 13 plants, I got 15 kgs. So it's just over a kg per plant. So banging on like a kg per plant. So definitely either want to try different varieties to set fruit at different times, or germinate them at staggered times so that you can then stagger the actual harvest on the performance of the varieties. So I'll go over all of the harvest just now. But I found the cherry tomatoes are very resilient. The oxheart tomatoes, they were not so lacquer. The fruits that they put on were amazing. They were so nice. But the oxheart tomatoes, they were very sickly. I don't know, they just never looked nice. They always looked a little bit sad, a little bit less green, and a little bit less vibrant than the others, despite the conditions being exactly the same. The Romas, they also look pretty good, but not as resilient as the cherries. But that also might just be because of the pests and disease that started from the side. They also didn't get as much sun, but I mean, that's like by an hour. I mean, this area here gets full sun. It's like basically, if I recall, it's between 8 and 10 hours of sun per day. So definitely good conditions for the tomatoes. So last year, technically, no, it is last year, we're in 2025. So last year, but last season, that's actually what I want to say. So last season, all the seeds or all the seedlings that we planted here, we grew them for about 3 months. 3 months. We had already gotten a lot of fruit, and then in February we got a massive hailstorm, and it decimated the entire garden. Everything suffered. But these cherry tomatoes, despite the amount of damage that they took, most of them survived. I think 1 or 2 died off on this side closer to the wall, but I was still left with 4 tomato plants, which produced a significant amount of fruit still after that hailstorm. So that's what I'm saying. So cherry tomatoes, these indeterminates, they're quite resilient, and they're a little bit hard to kill. I mean, bro, our summers, in our heat waves and stuff, it can get up to like 32 degrees here up in Joburg, on the odd occasion. But there we get a freaking hailstorm out of nowhere. Basically looked like it snowed. Bro, no, that's not lacquer for the plants, especially tomatoes, which are heat-loving plants. So, but despite that, they were still good. They bounced back. just to round up some of the issues that I've had and some of the things that I've learned, spacing is key, but it's not spacing for roots. And that's actually what I originally thought it was. It's more spacing for all the foliage. The root systems themselves, and one of these I tried to dig up as gingerly as I could. The root systems of one of the, I think it was an oxide that we took up, it was about 250, so almost the size of my hand plus my wrist. So about 250 in diameter, but they do go down deep. I read a quick article on Google that they can go up to 6 feet deep. That's deep, really. That's like 2 meters or something. So in terms of floor space, they don't take up much. It's really deep roots. So theoretically, you can plant them very close together without them having to compete for nutrients. But the problem really becomes managing all the foliage. If you're going to stake them up, grow them along a single stem, or you're going to have a top mounted support for everything, and again, grow them up a single stem, sure, by all means, space them as close together as you can. But if you don't have that sort of infrastructure, if you're only going to grow them up like 2 meters tall or 1.5 meters or something, I do not suggest it. Give them more space, grow up, have your single stem come up, top it off, but then have a few suckers come up so you can actually try and bush it out a little bit and increase your yield. And then the other issue with spacing, especially in the midst of summer, if you get a lot of rain or it's a very humid summer, big issues with blight and disease and pests. I don't know if the pests brought on the disease. It seems kind of unlikely, to be honest, with how overgrown everything was, touching the ground, touching each other. It was a mess. Get a lot of rain, a lot of humid, reduced airflow in this area, especially between the wall of tomatoes and the concrete wall. It was the perfect place for blight to set in, which basically took over all of my tomatoes in the end, and I had to reset the bed. So that's why you don't see any tomatoes here right now. I've reset the bed, but I still want to grow tomatoes here again. What I've done is I've taken a few cuttings off of healthy plants and I'm busy rooting them now. Yeah, so I'm down to 4 tomato plants right now, and I have a few volunteers. Yeah, so at least this reset isn't, I don't have anything. It's still salvageable, but rather do it now while I can, and then still make use of the second half of the season coming through. Going forward, here by the Lapa, where I have a little bit of a height restriction, what I want to try next is I want to try and espalier the tomato plants. So instead of growing 4 in a line on stakes, I want to stake at the end, stake in the middle, stake at the end, about 1.5 meters from end to end, and then grow 2 indeterminate tomato plants in there, sort of in between the 2 sections. The suckers I'm going to selectively prune so that I can then espalier them horizontally going across. So basically, instead of having like 4 in a line, single stems coming up 2 meters, I will have 2 meters with that same space, but then I'll have multiple suckers going across horizontally to try and make up that lost vertical length. As for this side, there's a few things that I want to try. I still want to try growing as tall as I can on a single stem. I want to try with stakes. I want to try with a top support method. So I'm going to have 2 posts with a horizontal beam going across, some string coming down, tied around a secondary beam at the bottom so that it's fixed. So the plants, I can then sort of twirl them around that string. I don't want to tie that string directly to the plants because when we do get high winds and stuff, I don't want any sort of force being applied directly at the roots. I would rather have it a fixed separate point to the plant so that that string is fixed between 2 hard infrastructure points, and then it just needs to support the tomatoes and there's no additional strain on the tomato plants. I think that's the way to go about it. I'm going to space it further away from the concrete wall. So instead of doing it 100 mils, I'm going to basically quadruple that to 400 mils. I'm thinking that it's not a lost space because behind the tomatoes I can plant other crops or companion plants or anything. The tomatoes from themselves, I'm also going to plant them on 400 mil centers, and then that just gives me even more space to be able to plant other small grain crops nearer to the ground. or in between and around the tomatoes. So I don't think that'll be too much of an issue. So in the same amount of space I will have slightly less tomatoes, but because we're giving them additional space for light and airflow, I should be able to prolong the onset of blight and potentially curb any pest pressure and all that sort of stuff. So I'm hoping that then increases the yield for those tomatoes. But with what I've had now, with all of the blight and stuff, I think next time, if I do see any blight issues, I think then is already the time to start thinking, okay, if I do need to get rid of these guys, I need to have a backup plan. So I'm going to either seed some tomatoes or start picking out some seedlings from a nursery and stuff, should you need to actually reset the bed entirely. Okay, and here are the cuttings that I took. So we took these cuttings on Monday. Today is Thursday, so today is the 4th day. You can see some of these guys are looking pretty stark. They're looking good, they're looking healthy, but then some of these guys are still very sad. So I don't think these guys are going to make it, but it's fine. I'll still have plenty fruits, plenty plants. With the volunteers that I have currently setting fruit, and then the small volunteers that I can still transplant, and then whatever it takes from here, I should have enough tomato plants to carry me through to the end of season. Okay, so just going through my crop calendar, my harvests for this year and last year. So over a period of 5 months, growing time, including harvesting, I was able to harvest 14 kgs. 6.4 kgs of Roma tomatoes, 3.7 kgs of oxheart tomatoes, which is the beefsteak style, and 3.9 kgs of the cherry tomato. So I don't think that's too bad. From last year, the harvest was out of 6 cherry tomato plants, I got 1.9 kgs. And from the determinate variety, which was Minesco tomatoes, it's a hybrid, I had 2 plants and that produced 1.7 kgs of tomatoes. So yeah, a significant leap in between last year and this year. Albeit I will admit as well, we did have more tomato plants. Very interesting experience as a newbie, very easy plant to grow as a newbie. Not much can really go wrong. You should be able to at least, even if you get a seedling from a nursery, weigh it into the ground, figure it out. Man, I think they're a little bit more resilient than people give them credit for. I mean, after these guys got decimated by hail, not these guys, after my first season's crop got decimated by hailstorm, I sort of realized, they're a little bit more hardy than we think. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you guys got some very good information from this. And yeah, good luck growing your own tomatoes. Let me know if there's anything specific that you guys want to see. I've got a whole bunch of videos planned, a lot of mistakes that I've made, a lot of learning curves, and I'm actually very excited to share that content.